Hey y'all, welcome to the Gone Outdoors podcast. Thanks for joining us. This is the place where we talk about all things hunting and fishing. As we like to say, if it's going on out there, then we're talking about it right here. So let's get after it with the latest episode.
Welcome back to the Gone Outdoors podcast. I'm Brad Gill, and today we are talking Lake Oconee, late summer, early fall, crappie fishing. The fish are still deep, and there is a way to catch them and catch a pile of them. And I've got the man himself with me today, Mr. Scott Williams. He is a national crappie tournament angler, and I've heard about this guy, him and his dad, Billy. Heard about them for years on the national tournament trail. He's homegrown Georgia boy and actually got in the boat with him a couple of days ago. So I wanted to call and follow up with him. Scott, you there?
I'm here.
All right, man. What's going on in Cochran, Georgia this morning?
Oh man, just doing our thing, trying to get some timber cut, digging peanuts, and just doing what we do.
That's right. Yeah. On top of the fact that you run all over the southeast and even out to far as Texas, I believe, crappie fishing, you've actually got a couple of full-time jobs, don't you?
I do. I own a logging company and also a timber dealership and also farm. So my plate is full on top of the fishing.
Yeah, and then you told me you've got 3 daughters, and your oldest one's like 11, and she's starting to play softball. And I told you to get ready. Your schedule's really fixing to get messed up, man.
Hey, we were at the ball field yesterday till 7:00.
Wouldn't trade it for anything, would you?
No, sir.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. So it is mid-September right now, and a couple of days ago, man, I was very, very fortunate to actually get to finally meet you face to face and get in the boat with you and let you show me something about how to catch these fish deep in the timber, under the deep docks, at Lake Oconee. And the cool thing about all that is I'm fixing to write an article about your techniques for crappie fishing on Oconee. And what you showed me in mid-September is actually going to take place all through October. But there's one great thing that you shared with me that's better about October than September. Even though the fish are going to be in the same place, they're fixing to start eating, aren't they?
Yeah, these fish are about to start feeding heavily to prepare for the cold water that's coming, the winter time. And right now, these fish are loaded on brush, on standing timber, under docks, anywhere, on bridge pilings, any structure that will grow algae and attract the bait fish, you're going to have crappie. And it is a prime time right now to go out and fish and catch a limit of crappie. And you can catch a bunch of fish. I mean, you saw it the other day. I don't know how many fish we caught before lunch, but I mean, it was one after the other. And it is just a prime time to catch them right now. It's my most favorite time of the year. Numbers of fish and good quality. The later it gets in the fall, October up into November, these fish are going to be putting on weight. And these fish, and they're putting it on fast. You'll catch some 1.5 pounds, 1.75 pounds, and every once in a while you'll catch some 2-pound fish off some of these docks and brush piles. Later in the year, not so much right now. I mean, you saw what we caught the other day, but the later it gets in the fall, the bigger these fish are going to get.
In that first big feed up, really, because we caught, we tried to we should have kept count, but we didn't. So we caught 50 or 60 fish, and there were no slab crappie. But the neat thing is, or the thing to look forward to, again, is that first feed up month, where you see it in all through nature where winter's coming and animals feed up, fish feed up. That starts now. That weight gain starts now. So that's exciting, from an angler's perspective that, oh man, the crappie are fixing to start putting on those pounds or putting on those ounces.
The way we fished the other day, those fish actually started getting on that stuff in June. And they were real little, 1/2 pound fish, sometimes less than 1/2 pound fish. And now, just from June to September, you can see the weight gain and the size of these fish are bigger now, just from June. And so we've got another 2.5 months to go. And so these fish, it's going to get good. I mean, what we caught the other day is what I like to call the perfect fillet size fish, the 3/4 pound fish, the pound fish, just the perfect size fish to catch for somebody that wants a mess of fish to eat.
So now let's talk specifics on, if somebody's listening to this podcast, how in the world can a guy go out there, get in his boat, go to Lake Oconee and catch some fish? And you said this is a month where you can catch them a lot of different ways, but there's two main ways really that I saw, or at least that we focused on, that we talked about the most. And man, the first one, this is a really, really cool way to catch fish to me, and that's vertical jigging and standing timber. And tell me about standing timber in Lake Oconee. I mean, there's a lot that you can see, and it sounds like from one end of the lake to the other, you can find this standing timber on Lake Oconee, right?
Oh yeah, there's tons of standing timber on Lake Oconee. There's some standing timber north of Sugar Creek on the west side of the river, west side of the lake, and it's visible. You go up, when you come out of Sugar Creek, you turn north, go up the river, and you'll hit standing timber up there on the left. It's sticking way out of the water. That's a really good area. Going back down south towards the dam, at the confluence of Richland Creek and the Oconee River, right on the south side and the north side of Richland Creek, there's a lot of standing timber, like visible, sticking up out of the water. That's got this plenty deep that holds a bunch of fish, and it's just a really great area to fish. And so what you want to look for is the deeper timber. And what I mean by deeper timber that's in 15 plus foot of water. And it doesn't matter. The timber can be in 40 foot of water. The fish are relating to the algae. You know, there's an algae growth on this timber, and bridge pilings and brush piles and such as that. And so it's attracting the bait fish, what the crappie are feeding on. And they'll be, if you find the right tree, you saw it the other day, we can catch 20, 25 fish, I mean, just repeatedly off of that tree. It's just a great time to be on the water. You know, with deer season approaching, you're going to get less and less pressure on the lakes, so you'll have a lot more of it to yourself. And it's just a fun way to catch them. Just go out and find some deeper water, find some standing timber, and if you don't have the fancy electronics, you know, you can still put a limit of fish in the boat. It might take you a little bit longer, but, you know, fish until you catch one, and when you catch that one, remember where that jig was at and just continue to cast right there, or jig right there, or slip cork, or whatever the technique it is. And I'll tell you another thing that to let people know what to look for. And me and you talked about this the other day. If you're fishing along and you see a tree that has some rope tied up to it, that's an indicator. That tells me that that rope's on that tree for a reason. Somebody has tied up to that tree and fished there, and obviously is planning to come back to fish again. You know, just look for little indicators like that. You know, look for a piece of a thumbtack or an owl's eye, or, you know, those little reflective tape thumbtacks. You know, a lot of people put that kind of stuff on there. You know, it's very subtle, but it's indicators. You know, it's there for a reason.
So you keep talking about the standing timber, and standing timber is not created all the same, because you keep talking about this algae. The algae gets on the standing timber, and the bait comes to the algae, and the crappie come to the bait. And you've got to bump around until you find the right standing timber. But once you find them, generally this time of year, you can bump into a lot of fish at that point, right?
That's right. It's just, you know, it's just like fishing any other way. Once you find them, right now the fish are really congregated. You saw it on on my 360 and on my live scope and side imaging. There would be hundreds of fish literally on one tree. Put the bait in there, and it's almost not even fishing this time of year. It's once you find them, it's just straight catching.
Right. I want to talk about that a minute, because I've never been in the boat with live scope until I got in the boat with you a couple of days ago, and it was unbelievable. And I did some research when I got back, and they make a live scope. I think they call it live scope vertical or live scope down or something like that. Your live scope's set up to where it's on your trolling motor, and there's a 20-degree cone that comes off your trolling motor looking straight forward. at whatever well, in our case, we were fishing submerged, a piece of standing timber, and you could see that standing timber and the crappie in it. To me, it looked like you were looking on a graph and you were looking at a piece of standing timber that was full of leaves, and that's
right. And the leaves, what you're looking at, or was looking at thinking it was leaves, was actually the fish. The live scope is a cool tool, especially for me as a tournament angler, because I can target specific fish. You know, I don't know if you remember it or not, but there was a bigger fish off to the side of that timber, and you know, you dropped your jig down to it, and live scope is meaning it is a live shot of what's going on. You're looking at current information with that live scope. You drop your jig down to your to that bigger fish, and he wouldn't hit. So there was a crappie sitting right below that fish, and once you dropped it, it ate. And then the bigger fish that was above it, as you were reeling that fish in, got after the crappie and actually followed it all the way to the surface. And we saw that it was a huge striped bass. It is a cool tool. The live scope, the 20-degree cone. I've got my transducer on my trolling motor. That's not the only way to mount it. That's just a way that I prefer to have it. And so anywhere I turn my trolling motor, I'm looking out in front of my boat at the desired distance that I have set. It goes directly under my boat, out so many feet at the distance I have set, and it is a live feed of it's almost like a camera or a sonogram under the water.
A sonogram is a good way to describe that because it is a live shot. When you put your jig or your minnow in that 20-degree cone, you can actually watch it fall down on the screen. You can see when it gets to the tree, you can see fish actually come up and nose the bait. It's fishing like I've never seen before, and I think it's really cool. You'll have some naysayers out there who say, that ain't fishing, that's playing a video game or whatever. But here's the reality. You are a national tournament crappie fishing angler. You and your dad, Mr. Billy, y'all go all over. You've done very well. In order to compete in those tournaments, you absolutely now have to have those kind of electronics or you're just wasting money.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many guys, and in all fairness, a lot of people don't want to compete to the level that me and my dad do. When we go to a tournament, I'm there for one reason. I want to win. You know, crappie fishing is nothing like bass fishing for a lot of people in the fact, you know, bass fishing are real competitive. You fish for a bunch of money. Crappie tournaments aren't to that level yet, but there's a few people like myself and my dad who want to compete at the highest level possible. And, when we go, we're not there to, go out to eat and fellowship, although we do that. But our number one goal is when I go to a tournament, if I'm going to be away from my family for a week at a time, I want to make it worth it. I want to win that tournament. But now a lot of people, and it's just the way that they are, they're there for the fellowship and to see and meet other people. And that's great. That's fine. But that's just not who we are.
You are there to win.
I'm there to win. I'm not looking for an early parking spot at the hotel or an early, reservation at the restaurant. I'm there till dark, a lot of times after dark, the last one to come in and the first one to leave.
Well, that's why you do so well. You and Mr. Billy, y'all have won some Georgia State championships, right?
We have. We both won the Georgia Slab Masters Classic. I've won the Peach State Crappie Classic and multiple tournaments in Georgia. We've won some Crappie USA tournaments at Clarks Hill, and Daddy's actually won some at Oconee, some Crappie USA tournaments before I partnered with him. He was fishing with another fella, and they've won several big tournaments here in the state. We've been fortunate since me and my dad have partnered up together. It's a great way for me to spend time with him, and just that one-on-one time, that father-son time, and we've been very fortunate to place high and win some really big events, and I credit that to him. He's probably forgotten more about fishing than I've ever learned. He's taught me everything that I know about. What I bring to the table is the electronics. He's the older generation. He's from the paper graph generation, and so I've got the electronics, down. I studied the electronics, learned how to use the electronics, and most of the time he decides what techniques we're going to fish at that event.
Well, y'all make a great team for sure. I was sitting here, we talked about it the other day about, he's the old paper graph guy, and he had to learn old school, I guess you'd say. And
he was triangulating on brush piles before GPS, you know. He knew how to triangulate to line up on a brush pile or a piece of structure or whatever it was he was fishing. And you're right. I mean, he's the old school. The mold was broken after that generation of fishermen. And there's not a whole lot of guys out there that, if they didn't have the electronics we have nowadays, that could compete like those guys did. He's probably the best fisherman that I know. I mean, even if he wasn't my tournament partner, you know, if I was fishing with someone else and he showed up at a tournament, I'm like, that's the dude you got to beat.
Well, let's get back to Lake Oconee. This standing timber, and it can be either standing timber that you see. There's a lot of standing timber that the tops are not out of the water. We fished some standing timber that was not out of the water. The tops of the tree was down probably 10 or 12 feet. That was at the mouth of Sugar Creek. You said depth does not necessarily matter. You said it could be as 40 feet deep. It doesn't matter because that tree's coming up, right?
That's correct. Yeah, so basically right now those fish, at the depth those fish are holding, which most of our fish come from 10 to 12 foot down, if you would take a thermometer, and we know what the surface temperature was, it was 90 degrees. If you took that thermometer and dropped it 10 to 12 foot down, it would probably be upper 70s. It would be that big of a difference in water temperature. So those fish right now, they want to be in the most oxygenated water that they can possibly be in, but also the most comfortable feeling water. And that's that mid, you know, you feel good when you're coming out of winter and you hit some 70-degree days, or when summer's fading and those 70-degree highs. I mean, that's when you feel good. That's when you want to get outside and do something. Those fish are really active in that water column that's the most oxygenated, upper 70-degree water.
So 10 to 12 feet deep in October. That's a good depth probably to look for some suspended fish, it sounds like, in these trees.
That's right. 10 to 12 foot deep over, 18 plus foot of water.
So 10 to 12 feet deep, suspended crappie over 18 plus feet of water in the standing timber. So run me through this. Let's say you locate some fish.
The three main tools as far as sonar that I use is side imaging. There's four. Side imaging, 2D sonar, 360, and live scope.
Walk me through this. You pull up, you locate some crappie submerged in timber, and you decide, I want to fish this. Kind of walk me through this. What do you do? I notice you even with all that equipment, you're still throwing a buoy marker out, which I liked.
Yeah. So, and the reason for that is, if you get hung up and you break off, and so your attention is away from your trolling motor, away from your electronics, so you're tying up the new rig or whatever. It's very easy just to look up, see your buoy marker, and know exactly what direction to go back to. So the buoy marker is just for a general orientation of where I'm at. The very first thing I'll do, you notice, is I'm idling. I've got my side imaging running, and so I see a standing timber or a brush pile or whatever it may be, and it has fish on it, right? So I'm going to drop a waypoint. I'm going to scroll over to that on my Humminbird unit, drop a waypoint. I'll get a buoy marker ready, turn around, and when I go back directly over it, I'll drop the buoy marker off to one side of it. All right. So then at that point in time, I'm ready to shut the big motor off and ready to get at the front of the boat and start fishing. So I'll go to the front of the boat, turn the boat around, get in position. I'll use my 360 to see, get a general idea. As I'm approaching the buoy marker, I say, okay, it's just to the right of the buoy marker, or it's just to the left of the buoy marker. And when I figure that out, then all my attention goes to my live scope. Once I find it with my live scope, that's where I'm at then. I'm locked in, I'm fishing. Very rarely I'll look at the buoy marker or even the 360, unless, and me and you talked about this, when you catch a fish, you can pull that school of fish off when that fish comes up. The other fish off of that tree or whatever, it will come with the fish that you're catching. And so and now most of the time they'll go right back to it. They'll go right back to the structure that they were on. But sometimes, they'll just kind of hang around to the side a little bit. And so I'll use my 360 to locate the school. And then again, I'm going to work with my live scope and my, whether I'm spider rigging or casting or jigging or whatever it may be. The key to it is knowing that you're fishing in productive water. For so many years, without all the technology we have, I would say probably 60 to 65% of the time we were fishing where there was not any fish. But with the technology that we have today, I know with every cast or every time I lower a minnow in the water, it's going to be in front of a fish. Now, I might not be able to make that fish bite, but I know I'm in the fish.
So are you casting a jig first? Are you casting a minnow first? Or how does that work for you?
Well, it just depends on if I'm in a tournament or I'm pleasure fishing. If I'm in a tournament, I'm dropping, 16 minnows down there more than likely, or, at least 4 or 5 rods with double minnow rigs, and then I may jig as well. But just pleasure fishing, I'll cast to it, may vertical jig it. I may put a minnow or 2 on it. But just depends on if I'm in a tournament atmosphere or if I'm just pleasure fishing. If I'm pleasure fishing, I'm not really necessarily targeting the biggest fish that I can find. I'm just there to fish and catch fish and have a good time.
I would classify what we were doing as pleasure fishing. And I noticed that more times than not, we would pull up and we'd each just kind of start off just throwing a jig in there to see what would happen.
That's right. Just to see. I mean, and think about this. Anytime you have a bunch of game fish or think about a group of dogs. If you have 3 or 4 dogs, if you throw a hot dog in the middle of those dogs, they're going to race to it. The same thing with those fish. You put one piece of snack down there, and the other one is so scared that the other one's going to get it that he's going to try to beat everybody there to it. They're greedy. This time of year they're greedy. They want to feed. They're hungry. And so you drop a jig in there, and as long as you present that jig in a way that looks natural and looks like an injured bait fish, those fish are going to eat. They're going to bite it.
How do you work your jig once you get it in that tree? How do you work that jig?
A lot of times I used to use the countdown method before live scope. I would use countdown method. I would let my jig fall and just say I would count down to 10. And then I would start just maybe either slow reeling it or bouncing it, just several different techniques until I got a bite. And then I would try to duplicate that. Right. So, but now with live scope, you saw this the other day. We're watching our jig go down into the school. We're either slow reeling it back or either they'll hit it on the fall. And sometimes those fish would follow that jig back almost to the surface of the water before they would bite it. So it's just a trial and error. Some fish want it falling down vertical. Some fish want it just a steady, slow retrieve. And others, you may just have to work it through. A lot of times I do all of those within the same cast, and to try to entice a bite because I'm looking at the fish. They're looking at my bait. I can see it. And I'm like, all right, well, this is not working. Let me try, maybe let me stop reeling. Let it slow fall, or I'll try to hold it still, just let it be real still in the brush. And it's just a trial and error until you get a bite, and then you try to duplicate that.
And we were, if I remember, we both had 1/24 ounce jigs. Is that kind of your standard size for this type of fishing at Oconee this time of year?
To be honest with you, Brad, we could have caught them on a 16th ounce. The reason I had a 24th ounce is because I was shooting docks the day before, and that's just what was tied on. So,
I got
a 16th would have worked. Right now, unless you're tournament fishing and trying to key in on what the big fish want to eat, it doesn't matter.
So if you're just out there pleasure fishing, meat fishing, just really maybe even try a few different things because obviously that 24th ball is slower than the 16th. So just kind of maybe have a variety of jigs with you. That's
right. Yeah. And you saw my bag. I had, 30 seconds, 24, 16ths. I had a variety, and it didn't really matter. I would just grab one and tie it on and go back to fishing, So right now that size does not matter.
And you said color doesn't really matter this time of year either, right?
It really doesn't. We were fishing with I think we had on some black and chartreuse at one time. We caught fish on. I think when we started fishing the dock, I think I put on like an acid rain and caught fish off of it. Anytime, like, the color really doesn't matter. You caught a lot of fish off of pink,
Yes.
the best I can remember. Again, you're putting that jig in front of a bunch of fish that is selfish. They don't want anybody else to eat. They want it for themselves. So
Sure.
right now, it doesn't really matter color or anything like that, just as long as it's a natural presentation.
And do you have a favorite type of jig? I know you use several.
You know, we were using a kind of like a half fly style jig. I use a lot of Ricky Willis's sugar bugs. I use a lot of Mr. Tony Allen's jigs that he makes, A&R jigs. I use a lot of Skipper's jigs, and of course I make some jigs myself that I use. So it's just you know, to pick one, I would hate to pick one this time of year and say that's the one I want to use all the time.
Just get some jigs and go fishing is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, just get something with a hook on it and go fishing.
So you don't stop at jigs though. Up there on your front deck, you had a cooler with some cool water bubbling, and man, that thing was slap full of minnows. So when they didn't bite the jig, you weren't shy to go to a live minnow either, were you?
I hardly ever go fishing without minnows, because I mean, if you think about it, that's the most natural bait that you can fish with. And, you know, so sometimes when it would slow down in the brush pile, when we were using the jig, I was quick to grab a rod and just with just a gold hook, and I'd drop a minnow down there, and you would see a lot of times you could fire that school right back up by putting that live bait in there.
So when you're on the water, you're fishing minnows. You say you generally never go fishing, crappie fishing without minnows. Is this time of year doing this type of fishing, how many minnows are you taking?
Brad, you know, this time of year you'll catch so many fish. Very rarely will I go without at least 100 to 150 minnows in my boat. If I'm fishing a tournament, we'll have a couple of pounds. We'll buy them by the pound, and we'll take a couple of pounds because you're catching so many fish. You've got to weed through so many fish fishing a tournament. You obviously want the 7 biggest. So I want to catch as many fish as I can that day, and hopefully have at the end of the day have the 7 biggest of anybody else. But just pleasure fishing, at the minimum, I'll buy 100. You saw it the other day. We had I don't know how many fish we caught before lunch, 50, 60, and we weren't fishing hard. I mean, we were talking and cutting up, and you know, taking pictures, and you know, just sharing life with each other. And we were fishing, but we weren't fishing, you know, like we would if we weren't doing this article. So at the minimum, 100. You'll fish 100 minnows up in half a day easily.
That was a Eagle Claw number
2 Eagle Claw gold hook.
4 pound, 6 pound test.
I had 6 pound tests we were fishing with. A lot of times when I'm fishing structure like that, you know, brush or standing timber, I'll use either 6 or 8 pound tests, a little bit heavier line, just because you're going to be getting hung up some, and I can straighten that hook with the heavier line.
You had a pretty heavy weight on, or what I thought was a heavy weight, but it obviously that's what you use, and it works very well. It was a half ounce.
Yeah, I was using a half ounce made by Water Gremlin. It's called Bullshot, and it's just a little clamp-on lead. I can slide it up and down the line to wherever I want it. Very simple technique. You know, and we were actually using just a single, what I call a single minnow rig. I didn't have 2 hooks tied on the line. It was just, you know, 1 hook, 1 piece of lead, drop it down, and as you saw, it wouldn't be there long before a fish had it.
And for this vertical fishing, you don't have to really get fancy with your rod and reels. I mean, about anything will work, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, basically, the vertical jigging like that, it is basically, and you're probably going to laugh at this when I tell you, it's glorified cane pole fishing. You know, I've got a reel on my rod, but if you noticed, I never used the reel. When we started, I stripped out about 12 foot of line and never touched my reel after that. You know, it was just basically there for, you know, if I needed to go a little deeper, I could strip some line, or if I wanted to come a little shallower, I could reel it up. But it is a very simple yet effective technique. Absolutely.
And like I said, we caught 50 or 60 crappie before we were absolutely burnt up from, you know, 99-degree day, 98% humidity. And so we weren't out there super long, but we caught a pile of fish, Scott. And So let me ask you this. And we talked a good bit about this because so many of our readers, they don't have all the fancy electronics, and they don't fish enough to really justify it. And I get that. So if you were going to make a recommendation or maybe encourage some folks that, hey, and the reality is the live scope does help you catch more fish. I get that. I think it's fantastic. I enjoyed using it. You may not catch as many fish without the electronics, but you know what? And me and my dad were talking about this last night. You could still go out there with the simplest of depth finders and go out there and catch you a mess of fish this time of year doing exactly what we were doing.
You're absolutely right. And I don't know if you even noticed this or not, but, when we started fishing that dock, I never really even looked because there was only one spot where you could shoot under the dock. I mean, it was a dock with an opening maybe 18 inches wide. And so it wasn't like, where are they at under the dock? Well, I'm going to shoot under the only spot that I can shoot on the dock. And I don't know how many fish we caught off of that dock, maybe 12, 14, 15. I don't know how many there were. But, situations like that, you don't even need a depth finder. Just start fishing docks, all right? And when you catch a fish, throw it right back in the same spot because more than likely, crappie is a schooling fish. There's going to be more than one there. You don't even need a depth finder to shoot docks. And it is a fun technique. You can feel the thump. It's just a hands-on, fun way to fish. And a lot of times underutilized way to fish because crappie will really load up on a dock. They're all and you got to think about it, under a dock. We were talking about that comfort zone a while ago, that level of comfort for a fish. The dock posts are acting like a bridge piling or old standing timber. That algae is going to grow on that dock post. So the bait fish are going to be there, but also under that dock, the sun can't hit it. So that it's going to be cooler under there. It's going to be in some shade. You don't want to be out. If we could have found some shade to fish in the other day, that's where we would have been, out of the sun. Same way with those fish. They want to be in the most comfortable water that they can be in. And whether it's under a dock, in a deep brush pile, on a standing timber, they just want to be comfortable where they can ambush prey, where it can be easy for them. They don't want to have to exert a lot of energy where it's easy to feed, and that's what they're doing.
How much water depth do you want on docks that you're shooting in, the early fall, late summer, the time of year we're talking about?
Early fall, late summer, you can catch them in all different water depths, but the majority of times, that 12 to 18 foot dock, generally is going to hold some fish.
And that can be anywhere, in the pockets, on the main river run. Just the key is 12 to 18 feet, it sounds like.
That's right. And the dock that we were fishing was right out on the main river run. Just so happened to be, I think it was like 17 foot deep under the dock. And, I'd be honest with you, I found that dock by accident the day before. I didn't want to put you in the boat and me not having prepared, not having any idea where to go. So I went up there the day before, got there about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and just went and scanned. I scanned a few brush piles. I'm like, all right, I know fish are on brush. I said, let me go to the north end of the lake. I went up to Sugar Creek to the standing timber that we fished, scanned that, saw there was fish there, and a thunderstorm blew up. And, it was raining hard. It was stinging. It was hitting you so hard. So I went to the first dock that I saw and parked my boat and got up on that dock and walked up to a restaurant and got under the shelter. And when I went back and got back after the rain subsided, I got back in the boat and I had my side imaging still up. I just looked at my graph. I'm like, holy smokes, at the fish under that dock. So I backed off and shot it and, just caught fish just repeatedly. I was like, well, here's a good dock. We can come fish tomorrow. So just things simple as that. And then so you could build a pattern on that. All right, so this dock's on the main river, 17 foot of water. Let me go find another dock just like this. Odds are there's going to be fish there.
Now, shooting docks, that you actually have a specialized rod and reel combo that you like for that, right?
I do. I like the a 5.5 or 6 foot HH rod. It's specifically designed to shoot docks. It's a dock shooting rod. And it's got a fast tip with a good backbone. And so what the fast tip allows you to do is you load that rod up as I'm holding that jig and putting pressure on the rod. And when I let go, it's going to kind of sling the jig up under the dock with enough force to get it way back up under there to where the fish are. The fish are going to be in the darkest spot of that dock.
Do you have a size preference on, and I know you probably play with some different sizes when you're shooting dock. I know you said it doesn't matter as much in the standing timber, but when you're shooting docks, or at least in this depth, this time of year, do you have a size preference?
Yeah, I like a really light jig, you know, a 32nd or 24th ounce jig. And the reason being, I can keep that jig in the strike zone longer. It's going to fall at a slower rate. So if the fish are 10 foot, I can keep that jig in that strike zone longer before the jig goes below the fish. So, I like a really light jig that, you know, in shooting docks. Now, if it's a really deep dock, and what I mean by really deep, you know, 25 to 30 foot deep, and the fish are really deep in it, I'll go to a heavier jig. But 90% of the time, I'm using a 32nd or 24th ounce jig.
And color doesn't matter in this kind of fishing either, just because it's a competition thing.
Color really doesn't matter. I like red and yellow under a dock. It's just kind of a confidence bait for me. But, you know, I know guys like white and yellow. You put another dock shooter in the boat, he'll be fishing with a completely different color than what I would, and he'll still be catching fish. So color really doesn't matter. It's more, like you say, it's a competition through the bait, you know, and just kind of personal preference type deal.
Okay. Well, we've actually got shot some video of you talking about your bait, talking about how to shoot under the dock, and actually catching some fish on that dock. That's actually in the article that's online at GON.com. Scott, I appreciate you taking me crappie fishing, teaching me so much, and I am excited about being able to share that information with our readers. The article will be in the October issue of GON. It's also going to be online at GON.com. And in that article, I've actually got two different videos. Number one, I've got some great video of the live scope and how that works. And you can see the jig going down and the fish hitting it, and we catch some fish. And I've got another video of you shooting docks. So before we go, I wanted to make mention that you and your dad have a very important tournament coming up. I'm not sure when this is going to air. This tournament may have already passed by the time this podcast airs. But you have done a lot of things. You've won state championships in other states. You've done really well here in Georgia. But you're still chasing that one big one, aren't you?
Yeah, we're still chasing that national championship. And so at the end of September, the last weekend in September, we will be in Grenada, Mississippi, fishing the Crappie Masters National Championship. And this tournament has eluded me and Daddy for, 10, 12 years. We've been close, really close several times. We've had opportunities to win it on one occasion, and it just didn't happen. But the opportunity was there. It was ours for the taking. We just didn't capitalize on it. But it is, like I said before, it is so hard to win. You know, I have all the confidence that I'm as good a fisherman when I put my boat in the water as anybody else on the water. But it is so hard to win a tournament that, you know, it just, those wins, they are few and far between. And when they come, they're special, you know, and before my dad retires, there is nothing more that I would rather do than win that national championship. And, you know, we're going to try it again in 2019, end of September, you know, but there's a bunch of good fishermen that's going to be there trying to do the same thing. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know. Maybe we'll win it. I hope we do.
If you're listening to this, go over to GON.com, read the article, see some photos we took, see some videos we took. And, Scott, listen, man, I know you are a busy man, and I appreciate you taking the time out.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Brad. I really enjoyed it and enjoyed spending some time with you on the boat. And we're going to give it all we've got in Mississippi. Hope we can bring that trophy back. But we're going to leave it all out there and let the chips fall where they may. But I appreciate you having me and look forward to having you in the boat again.
Yes, sir. I'll look forward to it, buddy. Take care.
Thank you. You too.